whether or not to be a manned flight to Mars. We're gonna have arguments against it now more convincingly than arguments for that. And that's all.
Look at the shapes of churches in the sky. They expressed the human spirit's desire to do the impossible, to overstep all prohibitions, including those of common sense. And what scientists think of it is said by academic Boris Viktorovich Rauschenbuch. There's a lot to talk about right now. The feasibility of a human flight to Mars. A meeting in favor of and against. It's a hot discussion, and that's not what most people hold for me. That's not really fair to me. That everything or almost everything we need to know about Mars we know. So it's cheaper and easier with automatic spacecraft. Let's have a vending machine. There is, of course, a great deal of reason, but you know all there are things that don't count in rubles or dollars. This is the desire of people to do something, to do the right thing, if you can put it that way. A human being can at least take the same nasty target that we've just seen. She's talking about going up uncharted into unexplained things. And that's the desire for something we don't understand. It's for the sound. And that's why I'm convinced sooner or later you don't even have that flight to Mars manned. It'll certainly be done. How is Mars attractive to us? A chance to meet an extraterrestrial life. At the very beginning of this century, a prize was established in France for the first person to connect with extraterrestrial civilization. The Martian word, though, with Mars, was clear at the time. An Italian astronomer, Schiaparelli, discovered an extensive network of irrigation canals on a red planet. There was no doubt that the channels were the work of our brothers, whose minds were affected by the terrible tragedy of the global drought. The gaps in scientific knowledge are filled with pleasure, and pleasure by writers. Remember how Alexei Tolstoy described her. And the elite, not moving, stared at huge pupils for the bad eyes of dreams. He's a dreamer, and everyone's a little lonely anyway. I certainly want to meet my brother in my head, but not like these guys who push their asses in the side. I'd rather have one of those, this fantasy silly artists. But serious scientists don't mind fantasizing. A quarter of a century ago, a correspondent member of the Academy of Sciences, Joseph Sklovsky, expressed an incredible imagination of hypotheses. From the astronomer's point of view, the movement of one of the satellites of Mars Phobos is due to the fact that it was hollow, and therefore failed to do so by Sergei Pavlovich of the Queens. He was a man of business, and he wasn't a fantasist. However, Sklovsky's hypothesis, and a reporter at the Amelian Academy of Sciences wrote in her memory that in the 1961st year, in the intercessional interval between the meetings of which the Council of Sir, the Queen admitted the mission of flying to Mars satellite so captured that he could literally find no peace. The main designer wanted to see if the phobia was really empty inside, and if so, what was the thickness of the wall. The Queens, as we know, have not given up on words. In the 1962nd year, the first Soviet Mars began. Then another 6 Soviet stations of the Mars series and several American stations left the mysterious planet. In the Marner Viking series, auto-intelligencers from the Earth repeatedly landed on the surface of the red planet, but did not run out to meet the surprised elite of neither mold nor microbes. but did not catch all the samples of the Martian soil that had been extracted and explored by Viking's landing machine. It's a dead spot. Plus temperature holds only a few afternoon hours, and at night it is replaced by a 90-degree freeze on the poles by white frozen carbon dioxide hats. Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna bore the brothers in my head. Okay, well, there's no way out on Mars to search the ground for an expedition after an expedition to look for a snowman. Where are you? Not yet. There are no official representations to Earthlings and crew of flying plates, although reports of informal contacts are no less than medieval evidence of shrouding. These four-legged people are really brothers in their minds. They understand everything, they're self-involved, but they're too naive. Nice, anyway, contact with them hasn't made us feel new, because dogs have been friends with people for thousands of years. It's another dolphin case. See what a burning interest they would have been. After all, these marine intellectuals have become known to the general public relatively recently, gracious, noble, and yet savage. They don't have any factories, missiles and lasers can't make. These images were taken in the 1975th year. America. The great power here is both the missiles and the lasers are doing well. There's a lot of experience here in space exploration. This baby is growing up at the side of one of the space centers. That's when our film crew brought together Soviet-American orbital experiments. Cooperation inevitably flows into the community of the Collegium. Cosmonauts and astronauts became friends. Remember the program we launched the Union ship, the crew left the lens and the cubes. Apollo launched from Shaw territory with 3 astronauts aboard Stafford with Clayton and Brando. The flight involved 2 dockings, joint scientific research, technical experiments, and inter-crew crossings. Television coverage from orbit has been observed by millions of people all over the planet. Even personal letters traveled around the world in space envelopes with space stamps. All of a sudden, it became a matter of interest to her professionals to think about the future of space. We are astronauts of the wretched crew of Apollo of the Union. Here's Ellen Bean and Bran Evans for the eye. We hope that Apollo's flight to the Union. It won't be the last. We can fly together in space. I can do it again with a greeting. In those commemorative days, the spirit of Soviet-American space cooperation was literally in the air. Here's a few interviews on the street with ordinary Americans. Vincent So Be Me Daddy. The recent docking of Apollo and the Union was a major new step in the history of space programs. The cooperation of Americans and Russians in space is very much needed by our peoples. An employee like that. Beg your pardon at the minimum.
The theory came from a song of the oven, and the Melody Luncheon is very happy.
We are looking for the Apollo of the Union. I'd like to see other Soviet and American joints. Soviet people at that time were rather rare guests in the United States. When the Americans found out where we came from, they were thrilled. Even General Houston himself seemed to welcome us on his bronze horse. I also remembered the selfless help of the local police. Unfortunately, further developments have evolved so that it is not cooperation but competition in space that has become a reality. The dream of flying to Mars was struck by a disease called the race for prestige. SEALs have been reported on the launching of an expedition to Mars. One of them, for example, involved over 50 shuttle cargo flights to near-Earth orbit. The terrible tragedy of the 1986th year took not only the lives of 7 courageous astronauts, 2 of whom were women, but also forced Americans to review their entire space program. Since the 1986, no one has ever stuttered about the Martian project. The problem of the reliability of space teeth. Let's not pretend that the solution to this problem is over. Our country has also paid a terrible tribute to outer space. His victims were Vladimir Komarov, G.R.G. Volsky,
Vladislav Volkov, Victor Horseman.
So space is dangerous. If there's a choice, it's better to put the crops at risk, not people. In July, the 1988th year, 2 new generation of AFOBOS automatic science stations, 1 and 2, went to Mars one after the other. And all of a sudden, on September 1, there was one break in contact with Focus. The surviving Focus 2 had already conducted a number of valuable studies alone in the vicinity of the Red Planet, and they also became silent. Dream and common sense. We're pretty good with both. But why are they always arguing? And what else is going to upset us? Common sense.
These people don't have fun, so they make money for bread.
Looks like they don't have another way. And these children, suffering from famine caused by severe drought, have no way of earning anything at all. Professor Volkov writes in The Truth, of course, flying to Mars is an interesting task, but it's not too early, because we have so much on the planet right now. That would improve the quality and nutritional structure of millions of people. It is both a global solution to housing problems and an environmental balance. It is also a fight against cardiovascular diseases and cancer, which take millions of lives. And much more that can already be done for people, but so far, according to American experts, it will cost about $50 billion to fly people to Mars. There are other points of view. The solution of global problems requires mankind's space power. To argue with Professor Volkov, a researcher from Charwild, for example, the opinion of the famous Soviet paleontologist Muin is convinced that there are real storehouse discoveries in the area of Mars. And life on Mars is not clear. Life doesn't really know why. From where, in his time, Swedish scientist Svantornus made the hypothesis of moving embryos from one planet to another. Why only our encyclopedia, without being embarrassed by the absence of the facts, so without appeal, was the hypothesis wrong? If we could compare our genetic code to the genetic code of even the smallest, but necessarily the living Martian microbe, Dream and reality. After the successful completion of the first moon mission, Michael Collins addressed Congress on behalf of the pioneers of interplanetary space. Of course, we can't launch our interplanetary ships off the ramp. Poverty, but we can't wait until we're resolved. All of our Earth's problems have not lost that enthusiasm, and 2 decades later, across the ocean and as a photo corresponder, he became a guest of Baikonur. We'll meet the Soviet scientists on our own flight to Mars. Collins said that in dealing with such a complex task, other countries that had experience in space technology and could be more costly should be involved. The same point was made by Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev during a meeting with Ronald Reagan. Presidents answered with caution, our scientists are considering this idea. Reagan Bush's successor announced a more definitely manned expedition to Mars at the beginning of the next century. He didn't give us the exact deadline. He's been faked by experts. The main designer, like Cherenko, calls these stages in the Red Planet research. Sending the Mars code to the 1994 and 96 years. Delivery to Earth of Martian soil in the 1998. The head of Space Group possible flight dates to Mars of a manned ship counts 2015-2017. What then remains to be overcome on the road to that goal? We both know how to collect ships from separate parts in Earth orbit. The manual and automatic docking of ships is a long-standing operation. And we're good at calculating interplanetary trajectory parameters. The Americans made 6 landings and took off from the moon. And Soviet programs of physical exercise on board orbiting stations and other special medical measures have ensured long-term work in conditions of weightlessness. Vladimir Titov and Usmanarkov stayed in space for a year. Finally, heavy vehicles of space and powerful launch vehicles are already available in both shit and shit. With regard to international cooperation in space research, so there's a lot of experience here. For many years, the Interspace program has been conducting joint research based on Soviet space technology. Through this program, a number of socialist, developing and capitalist countries have been able to contribute to the study of the universe and their own planet and have implemented a number of bold projects. What the hell are these toys? For toys, for models. But it's like they're flying out of sight. Those who are today 10 and 15 years old will be 35 and 40 years old in the year 2000, and 40 years of professional, creative, solid jobs and rights. Make a serious decision. These boys know how to fly to Mars. Two aspects must be distinguished in the exploration of the universe. On the one hand, it's obvious to everyone that it's the technology for its development, the power of man, the mastery of nature, and so on, what brings you direct benefit and without which we can't actually live right now. On the other hand, it's a personal aspect, a spiritual aspect, but if you like, Sports are questions about why people are skiing through the North Pole, for example, a person. People need to do something about it. And one such feat will certainly be to fly to Mars. Without this humanity to exist without subterfuge, I mean insanity, it's not.